Hello. So, today, I'm kind of reviving something that I haven't done in a long while. Which is, well, Mixpack versus Mixpack War. It doesn't really happen very often, and usually not enough of my friends are online for them to actually happen that often, but they're still some of the most fun battles that you can have in Path of Titans. It'd be nice if we could have them in different areas of the map, but we have got a lot to this video today. Let's just say that this entire war ended up lasting around an hour and a half. And I couldn't really go over every single move in super detail, otherwise the video would be about 2 hours long. In which, well, I can only make videos up to an hour anyway. But I have condensed it down into a manageable, I don't know, length, if you want to call it that? Sure, let's go with a manageable length. No dirty jokes, anybody. Anyway, but I have gone over practically everything that happened, and what I was going to say, it was one of the most fun battles ever, but it was also absolutely insane. There was just so many moving parts. I've tried to get it all into a comprehensible kind of format, just to make it understandable. But I guess we'll see. And so I've rambled on long enough, let's get into it, shall we? I hope you all enjoy. So for today, I ended up hopping on and joining my friends on officials. I ended up automatically just hopping on Ramp, because that's just what I do, but I ended up asking, hey, what's everyone doing? And they said that they were already in the middle of a fight against a group around Crater. And since it was a group fight, I thought, why not hop on Latin? But there seemed to be a slight problem with that. Oh shit. So, seeing as I wouldn't be able to make it in a very timely manner, I decided to hop on Deinonychus. First spotting Caden, who was playing on Hatzegopteryx.
Hi, Caden.
Before then seeing what we'll be up against, which seemed to be a various mixture of different apexes with the occasional Pycno, Daspletosaurus, and Iguanodon mixed in. And as you can clearly see, they're already pretty much pushing us back up the ramp into Grand Plains.
Jesus, how much is here?
So let's go over what we have here. So, we have Gusa and Toxic Midget on Daspletosaurus. Then we have Abyss and Keir, who are playing on Pycnos. Then we have Rasman, Frozen on Latin Venetrix, with me then on Deinonychus. And lastly, finished up with Terra, playing on a Rex. So we are kind of hoping that they'll end up following us up the ramp into Grand Plains, just to get them away from the Crater Pond, where, well, they have Spinos, so they'd be perfectly safe, though, well, it's like a boss room in World of Warcraft dungeons. They don't want to leave the boss room. So we ended up sending the raptors down into Crater to kind of examine the situation.
Yeah, they're all sitting next to the pond now.
Now, as for this Pycno that was coming for us, it was kind of funny, the little interactions. I didn't even hit it once this entire time. The only one who really hit it was Frozen, but every time that I would even get behind this Pycno, it would instantly run back to the water. Whereas it should be extremely obvious that if any of the raptors dare even touch the water and start swimming, well, they practically die. Because, hey, there's a bunch of Spinos and extra knockback from the Pycno to send the raptor further in. So instead of wasting our time, we decided to head up into Grand Plains, where there was an adolescent Kaiwekia getting swarmed by raptors.
Save the Kai. Oh shit, sorry. No, baby Kai, no.
Yeah, there's not really much we could do to save that. Oh well. So we ended up seeing the Tyranotitan that came out of Crater, and we instantly went for it. It was one of the Tyrannotitans from the group, so we'll probably be seeing it again later. So, with just a couple of piercing bites from the Daspletosaurus, a bunch of charges from the Pycnos, and finally, it was dead. But, for those who have a sense of humor, would you like to see a baby Kaiwekia get swarmed? Here you go. The obsession with Crater even has baby Kais trying to waddle towards it, though even without the raptor swarm, there was an alpha Didelphodon causing problems and would have eaten that little thing alive without no one to save it.
Didelphodon! Ah!
Me and Frozen did end up trying to go after the other raptors that were in the area, but I don't know how people can actually do raptor versus raptor fights. I really struggle with it. It's like you've got to try and keep track of this tiny, nimble, mobile opponent that is super fast and blends in with the bushes a lot of the time while you're also the same size. And of course it wouldn't be Path of Titans without at least one baby dino, in this case a baby Spino, questing in the most dangerous hotspot of the map, in which when they die they'll probably end up screaming into Global, screaming, "Oh my god, juvie killers." But anyway, we end up spending a couple of minutes around the delivery tree of Grand Plains, hoping that the grouping Crater decide to leave the safety of their little pond, before heading over to the Grand Plains River because we're in need of water, where Frozen is already having a nice little sip. But come across an unexpected surprise. How the hell that missed, I'll have no idea. That Sarko deserved it. I would feel cheated if I was that Sarko. Either way, Toxic and Caden ended up showing up, and ended up getting a little bit of the attention of the Sarko, before sending it back into the water. But because Frozen ended up saying that the Sarko had grab, I dare not even touch that water, though I did end up spotting something else in the area.
Oh, Kentro here.
That's right, a Kentro. But that's not all that was in the area. There was also an early subadult Eo, along with an Amargasaurus. And let's just say they seemed a little bit eager for a fight, perhaps maybe to get a trophy for the Eo to finish growing. God, that is subadult apparently. Eo is so much smaller now after its TLC. It's actually a little crazy. So the Kentro and Eo end up going after Toxic on his Dasp, in which Toxic ends up just batting the Kentro into the line of the Eo's charge. Lovely. Which is followed up with Caden trying to get the attention of the Eo to stop following Toxic, in which then Toxic has more room to go after the Kentro. Since there are a lot of big hitters in the area, especially with that Amarga with its extremely wide sweeping tail, my only real job is kind of just hitting the Sever Tendon on whatever I can to slow down their movement speed. And as Abyss and Goose ended up showing up to the fight, the herbivores ended up darting towards the river, where the Sarko was granting them a nice little safety net. But here's something I didn't notice when playing and only in the replay. An Eo from Crater ended up showing up to the area, having a glance at what was happening, and immediately turned back to Crater. No one noticed this when playing, and I only saw it in replay. Let's see what comes out of this. So Terra is finally making her way to the river because she's a Rex and so slow. And the Kentro is now finally crossing with a little bit of help from the Sarko. And so the Eo decided to get a little bit of a drink before the Amarga ended up arriving to the river, in which then it felt a little bit more comfortable to fight. Though that was short-lived as Terra ended up arriving and going after the Amarga with surprise attack ignoring all knockback, which then ended up pushing the Eo to try and cross the river, abandoning the Amarga. Though this was short-lived as they ended up drowning since they did not have enough oxygen or stamina to cross. And as for the Kentro, they decided to sit in the river and most likely drown, seeing as Caden was sitting on the other side of the river waiting for them to have crossed. But surprisingly, Kentro can actually just log out underwater, it has enough oxygen to do so. And so we end up carrying on with this Amarga for a little bit. That was until we ended up spotting another Amarga, along with then a Metri. We also ended up hearing a bunch of stomping in the distance, and so we had a feeling that this Metri was in the Crater group and they're on their way. So we decided to try and get rid of this Metri as fast as possible. Though in rushing down the Metri all at once we did make one big mistake, as the Eo who ended up having a glance at us and turning away, well, they brought back up now. And in that mistake, we ended up leaving Terra in the dust, to then end up getting mauled apart bit by bit. Though thankfully, Toxic was there on the scene to at least try and take out the Hatzegopteryx, in which, let's just say, he succeeded. So we seem to have our work really cut out for us here, and there's not really much I can do as a Deinonychus.
Let's do a slowdown on them.
Yeah, needless to say, that was not too smart of me. Thankfully, Deinonychus does have Slicer, which you can use to go and heal a little bit. Which, let's just say, this EO did not appreciate that one bit, did they? And so, they've kind of pushed us away from the river, which is kind of useful for us, since they are also just blindly following. And needless to say that if we had stayed and tried to fight them over by the river, well, when we were in Crater, they were practically just sticking next to the pond, so it's safe to assume that they would have just done the same had we stayed next to the river. So lucky for us, they did just follow us blindly inland. But what is starting to concern me a little bit is that my water is getting a little bit low for what should last throughout a war. So I went to the southern part of the river where it'd be safer for me to drink and avoid any possible Sarcos, in which I did end up seeing the Amargas there also. So I quickly topped up my water and headed back to my friends, in which my friends ended up saying that they had ended up killing the enemy group's Pycno. Cool. And as I end up arriving back onto the scene, I get a good proper look at what we're actually up against, and I can't lie, I was a little bit shocked, but also not really. Since, once you've played this game for long enough, you kinda know what to expect from what you're up against.
It's just so many Apex, mate. Holy shit.
And now for anybody who knows about bullfighting, here you go.
Toro! If you like.
And so, as I said before, we kind of need to just make sure that they don't end up running to the river. And a good way to do that is kind of just making them, I don't know, feel a little bit of pride in terms of pushing forward instead of retreating away. Especially when it's a little chicken taunting you. Imagine that. And needless to say, it worked out a
I
treat.
haven't got any space for a Metri.
As I said, this is a very, very prideful group. Which is where Cherry ended up getting on. And they were on a Hatzegopteryx and were perfectly hitting every single barrel roll onto their Hatzegopteryx whenever they saw them. But as for what we should really be prioritizing getting rid of first, it would have to be the Daspletosaurus, seeing as that would be really the fastest ground-based thing that is really in our reach at all times. Thankfully, the Pycnos were perfectly up to this task. In this case it was Abyss, and you couldn't always get out unscathed, but thankfully Toxic was there also to take a little more extra attention. And so the Pycnos just carried on looking for the openings in which the Dasp was uncovered, which then ended up forcing them to do the one thing that we expect from every single group of Apexes, to box in their Dasp, but they did end up leaving a little gap. Yep, and there goes the Dasp, though we did end up losing the Pycno in the process too. Poor Abyss. But your effort did not go in vain. And so after Abyss's sacrifice to take out the Daspleto, we noticed that the enemy hats had started to fly away. I guess all of the chip damage that Cherry and Caden had been doing to them had made them panic a little bit, and they were either going to go towards the cave and switch whatever playable they were playing,
hats?
or they were going to go to a waystone to call back whoever's died. But I was wondering, do they have enough stamina to make it to the cave, or will they have to land? In this case, in a tree.
No, he's not in the tree. Where are you going, Hats? Are you going to the cave? Are you going to land in a tree, or are you going to the cave? No, he's landing. He's landing in a tree. He's going in a tree. Yeah, he's dead. Yeah, he's dead.
And after grabbing a quick bite to eat, I noticed that, hey, Terra's arrived and she's come back on a Metri. And with that, we can actually keep our Dasps healed, so long as they're not bleeding, of course. But sadly, we are still missing our Pycnos. I didn't really see what happened to Kyr's Pycno, but we obviously just watched Abyss give his life to get rid of the enemy Dasp. So I decided to run down into Younggrove and waystone them both back. In which, on my way back to the group, I ended up noticing something a little peculiar.
Oh, it's a Bacca Rex.
So, do you all remember the Pycno that ended up dying but I didn't get to see because I was drinking over at the river? Well, they pretty much just waited out their respawn timer and came back with a Rex. Because, hey, if you died on something semi-squishy, well, why not come back on an Apex? Sounds about right to me.
The Rex coming from the home cave is at the bottom of Divide now.
And so, as I start to make it a little bit closer to where all the action is happening, Toxic is getting a little hammered, but then again, he's knowing that with a Metri in the group, that he can take a few more risks, knowing that he can just play a bit more evasively and get more damage out at a later time. But how about another surprise here? Do you remember the Amargas that were over by the river with the EO and the Kentro and all of that? Well, they've started also attacking this group. All I can say is, I won't complain. And unlike the Bacca Rex, which used to be a Pycno, their Metri that we ended up killing very early on, well, they finally made it back. And so, of course, they are going to be the first thing to go. So while the Raptors and all of the Hats and the Dasps end up attacking the Metri and targeting that first since it's a high priority, I start focusing more on using Sever Tendon on any Apexes that are trying to defend said Metri. Since they are probably sure to notice that our main target is going to be that Metri, and they will probably try to counter for that. So any lowered movement speed to stop them from getting to those counters in a faster manner is going to be super helpful. Though, let's just say, it really did not take long to actually finish off this Metri, as they would put all their attention on one person, ready for another person to come in and deal a bunch of damage. Pretty much until it was finished off.
Jesus, ouch. Oh, nice.
And so now, at this point, both the Dasps, Gusa and Toxic have popped their Rampage, meaning they deal more damage as they get lower health. And so, I decide to pop my Distracting Chatter, in order for them to gain 20% armor to try and negate the reduced armor that they're getting from the Rexes using that specific hide that does that. Though with the damage they did take, they are going to need to play a little bit more evasive until Terra gets her heal back off of cooldown. In which all I can really do after that is kind of just slow down this EO with Sever Tendon. It's not much, but it's something. And since we're doing the healing through a Metri, I don't really need to worry about not letting the Dasps get out of combat to heal, since, hey, Metri healing goes through combat. So I can freely just be as annoying, evasive, and, aggressive as you can be with a Deinonychus, keeping them in combat and stopping them from healing, since, hey, we killed their Metri already.
Yeah, okay, friendly fire from the EO to the Green Rex. Nice.
So at this point, we're practically just looking for the weak links, just to pick them off, and with this Green Rex being the lowest right now, the Pycno was able to drag away the people defending them, leaving the Hats able to just finish it off.
Oh, okay, it's dead. Nice.
And at this point, this is where another friend ended up hopping online, and this is Noodle, and she decided she wanted to hop on an Iggy to join the Carnage. But that's not all that
Oh
showed
my
up.
goodness.
There was
Oh,
also two
God.
more EOs of the enemy group, along with Iggy that we ended up seeing in the beginning in Crater. Oh, and I almost forgot, an additional Miragaya ended up joining in for them.
Okay,
And so
I'm,
they did actually end up surprising
fuck.
Gusa, and as you can see, he got very, very low. And so, as they're chasing him, all I can really do is just hit them with Severed Tendon, just to try and slow down their movement speed.
Okay, I'm just trying to slow down the Iggy.
I'm just lucky that I didn't get back kicked right there. I would have
Yeah, go for
died
it.
because I wasn't in the threshold of Lucky Feather. Though, talking
I'll
about
leave.
luck,
Yeah,
I
okay.
was very lucky that Noodle was around to let me take a slice of meat.
Oh, Noodle, I need to bite you for a meat chunk real quick. Thanks.
So we backed off a bit to the top divide of Grand Plains to allow the Metri to heal the Dasps. Though we are being slowly pursued by the Iggy, the two Eos, and the Miragaya, giving the rest of the group that they are with a chance to recuperate themselves. Though with the change to Metri's heal call, we need to actually keep these herbivores busy to give the Dasps a better chance to sleep and heal a bit faster. So, me and the Picknose go in, just trying to keep them busy, grab their attention, just so there are no interruptions. And let's just say, this worked out a treat, as we ended up buying enough time for the Dasps to heal in a timely manner, and these herbivores ended up going over to the berry bush to eat, in which then the Dasps ended up returning into the Carnage. Though let's just say, it did not take very long after we started fighting again for the rest of their group to show up, and their Avengers ended up assembling. Now, this bit was actually really funny to me. So, Abyss, who I'm in a group with, is a Picno, and he is an extremely aggressive player, to the point where it is kind to his detriment a lot of the time. And he ended up going in and doing a head slam on the Iggy, and then ended up getting caught out by a bunch of the Apexes, and is now being chased by their Tyrannotitan, and pretty much everything else here. So, my only
slowed.
job is just to
He won't
slow
catch.
down the Tyrannotitan, just to make it a little bit harder for them to chase.
It's running south down the divide.
Thank God he is a Picno, which can pretty much escape most of the roster. Now, we could actually see this as a little bit of a blessing in disguise, because sure, Abyss almost died from over-aggression, but he ended up baiting out the Titan, which was also overly aggressive, and they also ended up separating from their group, leaving them open to becoming a weak link due to, well, separation. This also goes for the Miragaya that chased. But let's just say it didn't take much for them to run back to their group, as they noticed that they were getting chipped down. So after all the times that we've gone in, dealt a bunch of damage, come back out, healed, gone back in, dealt a bunch of damage, came back out, healed, they decided to hit the rally call button to call everyone, okay guys, let's all just go back to Crater. But funnily enough, it only took a little bit of button pushing from the Dasps and Iggy, all to make them want to turn around and come back out and carry on.
Have you got any space in your group now, Gusa? Best I can do for now is just armor.
And so the thing to do very first is send in Terra with Metri, who is able to debuff all of their damage. And that right there is 30% less damage to any
Okay, they're all
enemies who
debuffed,
are
yeah.
affected by the call. On top of that, I'm using Distracting Chatter, which gifts anyone in my group 20% armor.
Oh, charge.
And that right there seemed to be enough for them to cancel their plans of going into Crater and deciding that they want to actually fight us again. And so our next objective is to try and drag them away from Crater. Or, at very least, get a couple of them just separated away from everyone else. Which in this case we managed to get 2 of the Eos and 1 of the Rexes separated from the rest of the group, in which we ended up dragging them down the divide of Grand Plains.
I'm getting the EOs to like turn to face me. Yeah. Okay, Green Rex is alone now. It's separate. Oh no, it isn't. It ran back to the ears.
Though, after dragging them down the divide of Grand Plains, it didn't take long for them to start regrouping up again. And this one EO, I have been annoying the hell out of for so long, just debuffing their movement speed the entire time.
Have the EO's attention. Oh. May, look how many there are chasing across. People complain about like a 4-man group, and then they see this, and they're like, oh. Mate, this group is literally gonna empty every single berry bush here.
Or at least that is what I would like to say. If they didn't all, yet again, have enough of us, trying to bait them away from Crater, and they decided to just turn back and start walking. So, in response to this, the people they left at the back are the ones we decided that we're going to try and pick off. And whoever decides to come back to try and save them, well, they are now invested. And so the ones who hung back were the EO, the Rex, the Tyrannotitan, and the Spino. And so what ended up happening here is that they are covering each other decently well. We're only really getting little chips of damage without absolutely imploding all at the same time. Since, hey, Rex and EO, they are very, very big hitters. Noodle on Iggy is able to deal good little bits of damage, seeing as, hey, it's an Iggy, the barrage hurts pretty damn well. But the Tyrannotitan ended up breaking off pretty damn early, in which Toxic is currently, well, giving it some trouble. Because, well, Toxic, he is an absolute psychopath that will just try and solo anything on something he shouldn't be able to solo it on. Which ended up making the Spino come over to help the Tyrannotitan. But now, in this case, we also have Gusa coming over on his Dasp, and also adding to that severe damage, since Gusa is running Piercing Bite, enabled to chunk down these apexes. And after a couple of minutes of diverting attention from each other for each of these apexes, and the little flick bites that Toxic is doing to this Tyrannotitan, Frozen was able to finish off. And so another Tyrannotitan was summoned to take its place of the fallen one. And so Terra, Gusa, and Toxic ran off to heal for a little moment. But, over with the Rex and EO, what was happening? Well, Elite ended up hopping on, and he decided to go on Patchy. In which, in the case of being an absolute nuisance, I actually couldn't think of anything better than Patchy here. Just how mobile it is, along with not particularly good damage, but not terrible damage, like in the case of my Denon. But funnily enough, the Amarga from earlier ended up actually coming back. They hadn't died or anything, I have no idea where they went earlier, but they decided that they want to continue where they left off last time. Yeah, I guess you could say that these two right now were pretty unfortunate that they were abandoned by the rest of their group. It's a big difference what a bunch of apexes all defending each other can make, especially when you're fighting them with a bunch of mid-tiers. Since the Spino Titan, and they also had a duck come to save their Titan from beforehand, but was a little bit too late, yeah, they practically just left the Rex and EO for dead. Seems to be a common occurrence lately. So we have Gusa and Caden trying to focus down the EO with piercing attacks, which ignore combat weight and just deal brute raw damage. And they chose the EO just because that's the most mobile out of the two and has the highest damage potential per hit, should I say. That head slam hurts. But with the Amarga finishing it off, then, of course, needless to say, moving on to the Rex, and practically treating it the same way as we did the EO. Could you imagine how fast this could have been had we all just gone a bunch of Rexes, or all a bunch of EOs, or Tyrannotitans? Man. I think if we all just went a bunch of Apexes, it would have just turned into... how do I say this in a nice way? But I can't say it in a nice way other than brain-numbing, or mind-numbing. It would have just been a group of like 20 people, 10 per side, if you want to say that, just slamming their faces into each other, and the fight would have been over in 30 seconds, and then we'd have to wait an hour for another one. You get what I'm saying, right? Instead, here, we had a bunch of small tiers, mid tiers, and the occasional pseudo-apex in there, with the Hatzegopteryx, and I guess you could say the Amarga as well, at this point. Though the Amarga was random, and we were kind of lucky to actually have it helping us in this case. But it was a lot of baiting, trying to lure people over to an area where, it's more to our advantage than theirs. And kind of just mind-gaming them into... well, just separating from each other and then picking off any weak links. Yeah, way more interesting in my opinion. But side note here, did any of you notice that Abyss was drinking a rock? Yeah. Okay. And lastly, I am going to make this quick. The only thing really left in Crater at this point is the duck that was there and the Spino. Everything else is practically logged off. So they've left their duck and Spino behind, and pretty much Gusa and Toxic and Terra have been keeping them busy, slowly whittling them down, or maybe not whittling, but chunking them down with piercing bites and, stabs from the hearts. And after they ended up finishing off the Tyrannotitan that was here,
Nice.
the Spino and duck eventually took enough damage to not feel comfortable in being on land anymore, as every time they were on land they would just take a heavy, piercing bite from Gusa, or a stab from Caden's hats. And so we already know that it is obviously going to turn into a game of, okay, we know what's going to happen, they're going to take enough damage, not feel comfortable in being on land, and they're going to go into the water, and then they're just going to log on us, because we don't have any semi-aquatics. But as soon as we do hop in the water, then we'll probably die, because it's a semi-aquatic against something that isn't a semi-aquatic in water. And so, preemptively, Toxic ended up logging, and he decided, you know what, I'm going to go on a semi-aquatic. And so he ended up bringing a Spino. And they were pretty much already hurt quite heavily by the time he ended up making it to the pond. And something funny right here, as he was about to actually start attacking, another Spino logged in right at that moment, and took so much damage off of the login debuff, and was eventually just killed, just before, one step onto land. It was kinda funny. Kind of unfortunate for them. This is why you don't log in Crater. But then, shortly afterwards, Toxic ended up finishing both the duck and Spino in one last bite. Yeah, so that's the end of it. Not really anything impressive, but hey, it was done. Leaving the final things that weren't us in Crater at this moment being a random Serra that ended up actually joining us in attacking their Spino and duck, and a baby Amarg. But I think we should crown this baby Amarg the king of Crater. They deserve it. Although I don't like that they came to Crater as a baby, because if they die they'll probably cry about Juby killers. I'll say this every single time. And so here we are at the end. And so, as I said at the beginning of the video, it has been a good while since I've actually done a Mixpack versus Mixpack war. And all I can say for this is, well, as I said earlier in the video as well, that had we gone just a bunch of Apexes, this would not have gone anywhere near as interesting as we found it at the time. Just for the simple fact that, well, we actually had to use a little bit of strategy to actually, make it interesting. Otherwise, it would have been over in, 30 seconds to a minute, and, well, the time between waiting for another fight would have been absolutely boring. As for the discussion video that I have been working on for a while, the script, and actually I'm surprised that scripting is actually quite difficult in terms of actually making a script, just so that I'm not rambling for that, because I do actually have points I want to get across, along with examples to make those points actually understandable and relatable. But that's coming along pretty nicely. It's just there's a couple of parts that I'm struggling to actually, I don't know, word them correctly so that they are understood. But either way, that's enough of my rambling. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope you all have a lovely day. Bye!